and welcome to Boston Gentrified. I'm Meredith Berry.
And I'm Lloyd Mallison. It's often considered a negative topic to many living in an urban community. Gentrification, also known as the process of renewal accompanying the influx of the middle class into deteriorating areas that displaces poorer residents. According to recent polls, the city of Boston is leading the nation in gentrification. Washington, D.C. falls in second place, followed by New York, Tampa, and Atlanta. However, gentrification isn't all bad. In fact, it has its advantages too. We get started today with Boston Gentrified reporter Muna Mohsin in Chinatown.
It's the third largest in the nation. Rich with history, Boston's Chinatown has been around for decades. Located in downtown Boston amidst the theater district, those who live in the area are afraid that new condominium buildings are taking over the neighborhood, forcing old residents out and bringing new residents in.
Other businesses feel like, Chinatown is shrinking. You look at other major cities, Chinatown is growing, they're doing more development, it's getting larger. But I feel like in Boston, it's shrinking, and a lot of people are moving away, more to the suburbs. I get upset as well. I mean, I'm happy that there are more condominiums around here, but I also feel like we're being surrounded by big, tall buildings, and people are having a hard time finding, eventually, where's Chinatown? It's so small now.
Big, tall buildings like the Millennium condos, the Kensington, and even the Ritz-Carlton. Leon has spent the past 27 years working in a small restaurant on Harrison Avenue within Chinatown, mostly known for their bubble tea. Due to the gentrifying neighborhood, Leon says another issue those who work or live in the area are facing is condensed parking.
They keep taking away more and more metered parking for people who wants to come in to do business here, and they're making them into more residential parking.
Although Chinatown may not be the same neighborhood it once was, business owners like Leon say Chinatown has always been a part of Boston and will continue to be. Reporting for Boston Gentrified, I'm Muna Mohsin.
Boston Chinatown is the largest Chinatown in the nation. However, over the years, the Chinese population has decreased. With new luxury apartment buildings like the Millennium condominiums and the Archstone being built, residents are moving to towns further away from the city, like Malden and Quincy, due to the increases in rent. Recent polls show that the Chinese population in these areas have tripled over the years. Although the Chinatown neighborhood begins to evolve, residents can count on one thing to stay the same, and that's the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center.
He joined the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center as a program manager in 2006 and was promoted to director of programs in 2011. But he didn't stop there. We're now joined by the current executive director of the BCNC, Giles Lee. Giles, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, my first question for you, Giles, is talk to me a little bit about your role within the BCNC and what are you responsible for? What are your responsibilities in it?
Well, as executive director of BCNC, I'm just there to make sure that we're still going to be sustainable and ready to serve the families that we serve. BCNC is a multi-service, family-centered, community-based organization providing services from childcare to youth programs to adult education, as well as family supports for parents to make sure that they are engaged in their children's education and development in a good and healthy way.
I see. So explain to me a little bit why you feel it's important to have centres like the ones you just described in a place such as Chinatown.
Well, as you know, Boston is a world-class city. A lot of resources here. There's great institutions like Emerson and other learning institutions. There's museums, theaters, and we have a city government that is trying its best to be responsive to the needs of its residents. But the truth is that for a recent immigrant or also for other low-income people, you don't feel like you have access to those institutions. It's difficult to get access. And so the job of an organization like BCNC or another community center is to empower people to feel like they can actually take charge of their own lives and be a member of the city of Boston and feel like Boston is their home too.
As well they should. So do you feel like Chinatown is being gentrified? If you do, what are your thoughts? Negative impacts, positive impacts?
Well, I think any definition of the word gentrified, clearly Chinatown is being gentrified. In 1990, the U.S. Census said that 70% of Chinatown was Asian. In the 2010 census, that number was down to 45%. That's due partially to rent increases and to the lack of affordable housing in Chinatown. And we've been seeing, just with BCNC, we've been seeing a number of people leaving Chinatown because they can no longer afford it. 1 out of 4 of our constituents now is actually coming to us from either Quincy or Malden. So people are actually moving outside the city to find a place where they can afford. I think that what that does to the community, I can't say overall is this good or is it bad, but I can say that the challenges that our constituents face are very real. So when they're not part of Chinatown anymore, when they have to live somewhere that is outside of the neighborhood, they lose connection to some of the other people that are in the neighborhood, just their friends, social connections, but also social services like BCNC, also education services. They also lose touch with, say, their religious or their religious affiliation or their economic opportunities, their small business infrastructure. They just feel less connected to a community that was once their home. And so I think that regardless of overall what gentrification means to the city, I think there are very real impacts that I can say we've been seeing firsthand in the people that we serve.
Okay, I understand. So what can those in the community do to make their voices heard, to sort of get behind the cause of trying to make sure Chinatown remains this diverse population?
I think it's important that people are civically engaged. At BCNC, we work a lot with parents and also with young people to make sure that they understand the issues that their families are facing and that their communities are facing on a day-to-day basis. Last year, we got a number of Chinese immigrant parents involved in the discussions around how the Boston Public Schools should redraw their student assignment zones, and I think that was a first for many of those immigrant families. That they've never had an opportunity to be involved in policy making or decision making at a high level, and the fact that they're in a new country and that's something that is afforded to them, I think it's important that immigrants take advantage of those opportunities. So I would say that civic engagement is paramount for people to make a difference.
You made you pointed out earlier the kind of programs that BCNC offers for childcare through to adult education. What other kind of programs do you guys offer?
Well, I think what sets us apart is that we're a family-centered organization. So when people come to our doors, we don't think of them as just seeking one service. You know, someone doesn't come just seeking adult education or seeking English classes, because they may have other needs that we can also help serve. So if someone's coming and they need adult ESOL, that's great, we can enroll them. But do they have children? Maybe we can help them with parenting classes. Maybe we can help them with parent advocacy classes, learn how to become a better advocate for their child's education in school. Maybe we can help them with getting childcare for their children, or a tutor, or a mentor. So I think the way that we approach our work is that nobody lives in isolation of their family, and no family lives in isolation from a community. So if you want to make Chinatown a strong community and make sure that people are productive members of this Boston society, you have to make sure that you are serving all of their needs at once and being aware of the kind of context that they come from. And I think that's something that we strive hard to do at BCNC.
Right. So Chinatown has undergone many changes in the past few years, as I'm sure you well know, from long-time businesses being closed down, million-dollar apartment complexes being structured. How do you feel about the constant changes taking place?
Well, I think our job as a social services provider is to make sure that we can maintain our responsiveness to the community as the community changes. As I said, the Asian community is a smaller proportion of Chinatown than it used to be, and so that means we've opened a second location in Quincy because people can no longer afford to live in Chinatown. So, you know, our job is to make sure that we are there to support families where they need to be supported and how they need to be supported. You know, we as an organization are a stakeholder in Chinatown. We've been there for 45 years, so that's not going to change. But we also have to make sure that we're paying attention to where people are going, and you know, we definitely notice that a lot of families are no longer in Chinatown, and so we have to figure out a way to be responsive, and that's why we opened outside the city.
I see. So with that, do you feel you're being pushed out of the city?
I wouldn't say that we are being pushed out specifically, but I will say that the fact that we've opened a second office in Quincy is kind of telling. The fact that there was 1 out of 4, as I said, of our constituents were coming to us from Quincy or Malden, which means that if they're coming every day, that's an hour on the train in, an hour on the train back. That's a significant amount of time, and the reason they're doing that is because there are not enough services in the places where they live that are culturally specific to them. They're still coming to Chinatown. They still feel like Chinatown is their community, even if they don't live here. And so even though I wouldn't say the BCNC has been pushed out, because we have a building, we've been there for a long time, and we will continue to be, there are definitely people that consider Chinatown their home, but are no longer residents of the neighborhood. And I think that really does say something about the way Chinatown has changed.
Okay, well, thank you so much
for
joining us today, Jazz. Thank you for being here. And we'll be joined again by Mr. Lee later in the show to further the conversation on gentrification.
In the Jamaica Plain area of Boston, residents are also grappling with the negative and positive effects that come along with the gentrified neighborhood. Similar to the BCNC is the Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Development Corporation. The organization's goal is to promote equal opportunity in Jamaica Plain and adjacent neighborhoods through affordable housing, organizing, and economic opportunity initiatives that improve the lives of low-income residents. Reporter Jordan Beckoff takes us to Jamaica Plain with more.
Jamaica Plain has a history of gentrification and revitalization, and not much has changed. There was some controversy 2 years ago when a Whole Foods market moved into the area, pushing out high-low Spanish food store.
I think to an extent, there are fewer Spanish grocers. There used to be a lot of local grocers around and more of a corner store type atmosphere to the entire shopping experience, and now that's gone. It brings a specific type of tenant base. You're looking at people that have a little bit more income, which can help the local economy, but at the same time you may be displacing others that might not be able to afford rent, might not be able to shop at Whole Foods, and any competing shopping centers around.
Some people, like Sally Swenson from the Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Development Corporation, are trying to revitalize without pushing lower-income locals out.
While we're making the neighborhood look more beautiful and more attractive and safer, we always try to be thinking about what we can do to make it a place, to make it possible for low-income people to stay in the neighborhood, and also to stay in the neighborhood and improve their lives so that they're not always low-income people.
The JPNDC is currently working on a project that will revitalize Jackson Square.
Our hopes are that whereas right now it's just kind of a place people go through, we want it to be a place where people, feel happy living, where they'll visit, where they'll, enjoy walking along the corridor or doing some recreational activities. So it'll be a place where people can live, go to work and be a neighborhood again.
Well, Lloyd, sounds like they are keeping communities safe while also keeping affordable housing.
Yeah, sounds like a formula more people should strive to follow. Coming up after this break, reporter Clara Lopez tells us what changes are being brought to the Roxbury neighborhood and who is being affected the most.
And later, we shift the focus of this conversation and head over to the political side by talking to our gentrification expert, Bryson Brown. You're watching Boston Gentrified. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Boston Gentrified. Now we head over to Roxbury, where Project Right is working to promote growth in the Roxbury community.
The Project Right organization trains and supports leadership in the Roxbury and North Dorchester community by providing an inclusive network for resident organizations to engage in community building efforts. Boston Gentrified reporter Clara Lopez has more.
Taking Roxbury or improving it. Roxbury is one of the many neighborhoods in Boston affected by gentrification. The improvement of the neighborhood could cause residents to move out due to the rising housing market.
Are we building or rebuilding this community for our people, or are we rebuilding this neighborhood for people who are coming from the outside, some beautiful people who are going to come and buy these houses up and gentrify this neighborhood?
3 to 4 blocks away, you'll see a completely different neighborhood. Here in Roxbury, you'll see problems as gangs, lack of affordable housing, and empty businesses. But activists are taking action.
There's an opportunity now to get into the wealth creation initiative that says businesses is important, residential neighborhoods can be balanced, but you also need the corporate side.
Stability could be the outcome if new businesses step into the neighborhood. Yet Haley Breeman is a Roxbury resident, and she is uncertain of what will happen when developed companies take the community.
We don't need another McDonald's, we don't need another Burger King, we need to find a good restaurant. But again, that gives the people that are trying to move us out more reason to move in.
Breeman, as other activists hope to have no reasons to leave. They just want a better community, taking into account the economic situation of its residents. In Roxbury, Clara Lopez.
And now on the line, we're joined by future NYC government employee Bryson Brown, who will give us some insight on some of the pros and cons that come with gentrified neighborhoods. Bryson?
Yes.
Hi.
How are you,
Thanks for having
Bryson?
me on.
Yes, thank you for being here. Bryson, talk to us about gentrification. Many simply hear the term, but do not fully grasp a meaningful understanding of it. Can you break down what gentrification is?
Well, I think the best way to explain it is neighborhoods that have suffered from urban blight, sort of urban decay and urban neglect by cities and by corporations and local governments. People are sort of moving back to these neighborhoods, people with higher incomes than those that have originally been living there. And so they have come there to live and set up businesses. And for a lot of the people that have been living in these neighborhoods for years and decades even, they've sort of seen increases in prices of local goods, of basic necessities such as food, and also rent, which is a huge issue for a lot of people that have been living in these neighborhoods for years. As people with more money have come into these neighborhoods to live and set up businesses, for those that have been living there for quite some time, their rent prices have gone up.
I see. Bryson, could you talk to me a little bit about some of the positive impacts as well? We see a lot of the negative impacts very often of gentrification, but could you talk to me maybe a little bit about some of the positive impacts as well?
Well, I think in a lot of neighborhoods that have been gentrified, especially along the East Coast, I know of New York and Washington, D.C., for example, there has been some slight reductions in crime in the Harlem neighborhood of New York City, where gentrification is happening as we speak. There has been reductions in crime. So I think that's a huge benefit. That's a huge positive for a lot of cities and a lot of areas being affected by gentrification. But also there have been examples of where schools have gotten better. Education quality has gotten better in some of these neighborhoods. So there are a lot of positives to gentrification.
Okay, great. And what are some negative effects of gentrification, Bryson?
Well, I think the biggest issue for a lot of people that I've spoken with who live in areas such as Harlem or in areas such as the northeast side of Washington, D.C., they've seen that rent has increased. And when you live on such a low income and you live hovering around the poverty line that a lot of people that have been living in these neighborhoods for years, when rent becomes much more of a percentage of your income, it becomes hard to live in these neighborhoods. And I think if you've look at Washington, D.C., a lot of people have been moving out of Washington, D.C. and into Prince George's County in Maryland, which is not as safe and is not as economically vibrant as sort of some areas in Washington, D.C. and in New York City. A lot of people have moved out of Harlem and into areas such as the Bronx, where there is more poverty and more crime.
Okay, Bryson, I read your Harlem gentrification article, which was very great, by the way, and I was hoping you might be able to explain it a bit for us. Within it, you include quotes from an interviewee that says, the good side is we have more tourism, we see better buildings being put up, and it's okay because it's multiracial. Bad side of this is that people have been living here all their lives, can't afford to live here any longer, and that's very bad. But to be honest, I'll give it 50-50. I just would like to know a little bit about what inspired the article, why you wrote it, what you were hoping to achieve with it, and what you learned from it.
Well, what I hoped to achieve from the article was not just publishing an article on gentrification, but learning about what a lot of people in these neighborhoods are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And what I think I learned most is that gentrification is not a black and white issue. It's not either good or bad, positive or negative. It's sort of a hodgepodge of issues affecting education, crime, rent, sort of bread and butter issues for people that have been living there originally and people that are coming in. And I think there are a lot of stereotypes to gentrification. You know, this is idea that rich people, more rich Caucasian and white people are moving into these neighborhoods and dramatically increasing rent prices. I think that's not necessarily the case. I think it's a lot of young people that may have a little bit more income than people that were living there previously. But I think it's not sort of just rich people moving in and completely taking over the neighborhoods. I feel like it's a gradual process, And I also feel that a lot of people that are moving into these neighborhoods understand their position. They understand that they're coming in with more income than people that have originally been living there. So I think it presents a lot of challenges, but it also produces a lot of good.
Bryson, thank you so much for joining us on the phone from New York. For those of you just tuning in, that was Bryson Brown calling from New York City with the pros and cons of gentrification. As he mentioned, while gentrification is often shed in a bad light, there are certainly positive impacts it may have on neighborhoods and communities wherever it takes place. Up next, Kathy Brown from the Boston Tenant Coalition is here to join us after the break.
You're watching Boston Gentrified. Stay with us. Welcome back. Joining us now is coordinator from the Boston Tenant Coalition, Kathy Brown. Kathy, thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Now, before we delve deeper into your thoughts on gentrification, Kathy, talk to us about your responsibilities within the Boston Tenant Coalition.
Well, I'm the coordinator of the Boston Tenant Coalition, which is a coalition of tenant groups, community groups, homeless groups, working together to try to preserve and expand affordable housing in Boston and also to protect the rights of tenants living in Boston.
Great. And for those who don't know, what exactly is the Boston Tenant Coalition? What services and programs are provided?
What we do is we do some education, but mostly we do advocacy. We do organizing to, working on different affordable housing campaigns and legislation to, again, try to protect and expand the supply of affordable housing in Boston and also protect and expand the rights of tenants, low and moderate income tenants in Boston.
Okay, so what about your role specifically within the BTC? What do you do specifically for it?
I'm the coordinator, and so I oversee, but I work a lot on campaigns, including campaigns on this very topic, in terms of how to, protect, how to, working with the organizations that are part of the coalition, how to, keep people in Boston that are really, getting pushed out.
And in which area of Boston do you reside?
I live in Jamaica Plain.
You do? And have you ever lived in a neighborhood outside of Boston that experienced gentrification? Jamaica Plain, obviously, is very gentrified.
I actually haven't.
Okay.
Okay, well, what other organizations are you involved in, aside from the BTC, that promote low-income communities and affordable housing?
Well, in Jamaica Plain, I actually am both on the board of the Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Development Corporation, which you heard from earlier, and I also work with the Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Council Community Development and Housing Committee, and I also volunteer. One of our active members, both JPNDC and City Life Vida Urbana, are active organizations within the Boston Tenant Coalition, and I actually worked with City Life Vida Urbana, which is a tenant and community organization that has been fighting a lot around gentrification for over like 35 years, and I worked with them for about 10 years in Jamaica Plain.
Oh, wow.
Okay, we're now joined again by the Executive Director of the Boston Neighborhood Chinatown Center, Giles Lee. Giles, are you with us again? Hi.
How you doing?
So, we're going to start us off with a little bit of a discussion, just sort of get a better understanding of gentrification in and around Boston. So, question to anyone who would like to answer: is gentrification a necessary step in urban revitalization?
I don't think so. I think that the type of development that where nonprofits can do economic development and do affordable housing development to make improvements to the neighborhood. And one of the things about gentrification is it's the people that have been working hard to make improvements to the neighborhood. They're the ones that have been making the improvements to make a neighborhood safer, that other people want to come in. So, and other, civic engagement, parks, whatever, they've been doing that organizing work, that all of a sudden that neighborhood that didn't look so desirable to people from the outside all of a sudden looks pretty, desirable. And if you're a tenant, you could be in big trouble unless you have high incomes.
So do you think that there's a way to bring in new residents without forcing the old out?
Well, I think that as much, as much sort of nonprofit, housing that's out of the market, the market goes up and down, and housing that can be permanently affordable outside of the market is a key strategy to keeping people in, and also economic development in terms of investing resources in the social services that Giles spoke about, all key parts, of making the community. Small businesses, investing in small businesses. Small businesses are also something that gets pushed out, like in Jamaica Plain, a lot of the small businesses are subject to getting pushed out, including the ethnic businesses. So the kind of development that can be done to really keep people in place and grow the wealth of the community that is living there and that's been making the improvements. And other owner-occupied housing, people that are coming to own and invest and live in the community and get to be a part in the community.
Can I add one thing there?
Yeah, sorry.
I think that the other thing that's important when we're talking about development, I don't know if it's, from my point of view, I don't know if we should slow the rate of development or if it's just right. But regardless of how development happens, I think it's important that City Hall makes sure that developers are accountable to the communities that they build in, so that they're getting buy-in from people who live there, from the community-based organizations who are there, and that the money that is coming from that development, that a portion of that is going back into the community. And I mean really to those community-serving organizations that are making sure that the residents, the traditional residents of that neighborhood, have job opportunities, have housing opportunities, have more education opportunities. If they're not going, if they can afford to live in new developments, I think that is one of the great things that can happen. But regardless, it can't just be about housing. It's got to be about making sure that the entire neighborhood and community stays healthy.
Well, I'd be really interested to know, actually, just from both of you, what your definition of gentrification actually is. So could we, or a gentrified neighborhood, what do you guys both define a gentrified neighborhood as?
I guess how I'm seeing, just as we're, really amidst, Boston being the most gentrified city, and many of these communities like Chinatown, Jamaica Plain, I mean, throughout the city, we're seeing gentrification. Gentrification is the gentry moving in, the wealthier people moving in, at the expense of low-income people getting pushed out. That's how I see it. Maybe there's a different academic definition, but that's how I'm experiencing and seeing it where I live and where I work and the groups that I work with.
Giles, what about you?
I would say look at Chinatown in 1990 and look at Chinatown now, and the difference is gentrification.
Okay, great. Do you guys think that there are ways to make improvements, or are there improvements made by gentrification welcomed by others in the community?
Well, I think it's, from my point of view, there definitely are. I can't say whether gentrification is all good or all bad, but I do recognize that along with the challenges that come with it, that there are good things that come, from the development and how things happen. I think it's important that the people who are the traditional kind of residents of that neighborhood and community members also be able to benefit from the kind of good things that happen as development happens. So definitely there are positive things that happen as progress kind of marches on, but it would be great if we could make sure that all community members are always kind of included in the thinking and the planning for how that happens.
Well, so we seem to be hitting a lot on the social costs. What do you feel is the social costs of economic growth specifically?
The social cost, well, it depends on what kind of growth you're talking about. If you're talking like, the development that Giles is talking about, luxury housing development, or really high-end restaurants in Chinatown, is really different than support for a neighborhood business, and that's the kind of a neighborhood business that serves the residents and does culturally appropriate food, clothes, whatever, whatever, and that's the kind of economic development that I'm interested in. There's been a lot of really great. A lot of nonprofits have been working in investing in communities like Jamaica Plain and DC, but throughout Boston, helping to support economic development that benefits really benefits the residents of the community, and the larger city as well. But that's the kind of economic development I think the luxury, the high-rise development that's not really benefiting outside of the the role of developers contributing to, funds for affordable housing, setting aside, percentage, but a significant percentage, and housing that's actually truly affordable fact, with all the development, some of the affordable housing that's been developed actually isn't really affordable to median income people, especially people of color, but also renters. It's
great. Now, a lot of people feel as though the government doesn't really define, recognize, or deal with gentrification. Do you guys feel like this is true?
I think Boston, I think the city government does recognize gentrification, and you know, both the old administration, the new administration, I think is trying to grapple with it. There may be some different points of view about, you know, what are the best strategies, but we're also working together, you know, on definitely, you know, looking again at housing and economic development strategies, supporting social services that are critical to, you know, keeping the neighborhoods together, the schools, you know, as much as, you know, I think we can work together. And I think the city, you know, the Mayor Walsh was out, I was at a meeting, a town hall meeting that was done in Chinatown earlier this year, one of the first, I think, probably larger community meetings that the mayor came to. And he was there to listen to people's stories, and people talked about being displaced from Chinatown, and really hard, you know, in terms of people getting pushed out, not to, unfortunately, areas where there are services that Giles spoke about, but, you know, communities where there were not services, where they couldn't get back to their jobs in Chinatown and then like lost their jobs. I mean, that kind of real destruction. Yeah. That's why I think it's really wonderful, the work of the neighborhood center here that is actually also going to where people are pushed out, given the reality is people are getting pushed out, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I do just want to give you, Giles, a moment to give any closing thoughts.
Well, you know, as I was starting to say, I think Mayor Walsh has been responsive. I think he's doing his best to kind of figure out how he can make Boston a city of the future, but also make sure that he's listening to the residents and the people that are of the communities. And, you know, it's going to take some time to figure out, but as long as he and City Hall is partnering with organizations like us, as well as Boston Tenant Coalition, as well as all the different kind of service providers and advocacy organizations across the city, I think that we will figure out a way for Boston to become the city that we want it to be.
Well, Giles, Kathy, thank you both for being here. That's all we have for you today. Tune in next week as we continue reporting on the latest in gentrification news in the greater Boston area. Until then, you can continue to stay up to date on the most critical news online at bostongentrification.com. My name is Meredith Berry.
And I'm Lloyd Mallison. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.